I'm back with a video that will provide you with information and analysis about Argentina, which I'm covering for the second time. Get ready. I'm going to give you an enlightening perspective on developments in Argentina. A very important laboratory experiment is being conducted there. If it works, we can immediately begin to see that there are aspects that need to be adapted to Turkey. If you haven't watched it yet, start with my first Argentina video. However, due to the negative results he experienced in the provincial elections just a month and a half prior to this election, polls had given him a chance of around 30%. However, Milei significantly increased his power in both the Senate and the Assembly, garnering over 40% of the vote. He is very close to winning an absolute majority in both and could achieve this in the next midterm elections in October 2026. His popularity has even surpassed 50%. This rate, especially among young voters, is around 70%. So, according to OECD estimates, Turkey will replace Argentina in the inflation rankings. Isn't that tragic? In year-end inflation expectations, this rate is 23% for Argentina and 31% for Turkey. And if you believe the official figures released in Turkey, meaning real inflation, Argentina may have already surpassed us in this regard. Their annual inflation has already fallen from around 300% to around 47%. The debt of their treasury and central bank has decreased by $29 billion. The poverty rate fell from 53% to 38%, and the extreme poverty rate fell from 18% to 8%. 10 million Argentines are no longer in the poor category. Housing supply increased by 300%, while housing prices fell by 40%. Many taxes on imports, vehicle purchases, and foreign exchange transactions were abolished. Other taxes were reduced. Mandatory solidarity contributions from workers were abolished. Of course, incredible savings were made in the public sector to make all of this possible. We're talking about a 30% cut, half of the ministries were closed, etc. If everything was going like a fairy tale, why did the Nationalist Party, La Avanza, lose to the Socialists in the first elections in September, and then win again in the midterm elections just 15 months later? To understand this strange situation and the rapidly changing sociological reactions taking place in Argentina, we need to understand a little bit about the country's past and, through these experiences, the psychology of its society. It gained independence from Spain in 1816 and, inspired by the United States, enacted a constitution in 1853. This is a relatively young country. Moreover, because its population was initially so small at the time, per capita income shows that Argentina surpassed many European countries, and in some years, even the United States, in terms of prosperity from the 1890s to the 1910s. That golden age was thanks to the fertile Pampas region in the country's northeast. It relied on beef and wheat exports from there. This attracted millions of immigrants from countries like Spain and Italy, and Argentina's population grew from 500,000 to 5 million. However, when the global depression hit in 1929, Argentina's gross domestic product fell by a quarter and its exports fell to a third. This led to political chaos, and in 1930, the first military coup occurred. This was a very bad period that lasted 10 years, sending the country into an endless spiral of military coups. Governments changed, but no politician was able to reverse the existing rights, aid, social policies, and support. It became impossible to hold power otherwise. Whenever anyone attempted reform in Argentina, the people immediately took to the streets or the military arrived. 65% of savings disappeared. During the preceding presidency of Javier Milei, Fernandez continued to pursue left-wing populist themes such as opposition to the IMF, anti-imperialist rhetoric, and equity in income distribution, and the same mistakes were repeated. Inflation figures were misrepresented. The government attempted to hide the truth from its citizens, and the country defaulted 3 times in a 20-year period. By 2023, poverty had reached 40%. Argentina, my friends, has had fiscal deficits for 113 of its 123-year history. Of course, there's no left or right in populism. Both are catastrophic. But right-wing populism is a relatively new phenomenon. The original source of the kind of populism that corrupts and destroys countries and societies is Marxism. I explained the reasons for this in more detail in another video. You can access it again from the link provided or in the explanation section. Ultimately, Argentina's competitiveness vanished due to isolationism, protectionism, and a lack of innovation. Throughout this entire process, politicians ate, drank, filled their pockets, and then left the table without paying. Due to the sociological traumas created by these historical processes, the corrupt politicians in Argentina are now incredibly nauseating. So, even if the country is improving, they don't want to see someone who engages in corruption and only wants to cut their own throats. In short, the Argentinian people have no trust in the Argentine government, its system, or its politicians. And this extremely fragile relationship is no different for Javier Milei. But just a few weeks after the peso switched to floating exchange rates, documents were leaked to the press in Argentina. The documents revealed corruption among government officials and individuals close to Milei, including Milei's own sister. This scandal was embarrassing for an administration that had set out to end corruption, including allegations that his brother had accepted large bribes from private companies for government contracts and had accused his predecessors of being thieves. It was a scandal that circulated in the media for weeks. Milei declared that the allegations were completely false, that she would sue him, and that she would fight until the truth was revealed. But the damage was done. People once again began withdrawing their money from the system, and the peso lost 25% of its value. Unwilling to burn through reserves and avoiding direct intervention due to promises made to the IMF, the nation initially resorted to fine-tuning policies. For example, it increased bank reserve requirements. However, when the sell-off accelerated after the election results on September 7th, it was forced to intervene by purchasing peso directly from the market. In other words, to stem the tide, the Milei government, with a stunning irony, intervened in banks and markets. It burned through dollar reserves. With reserves depleted on September 22nd, with the peso at 1,500, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent announced the opening of a $20 billion swap line with Argentina.